everybody, this is Mrs. Sanchez. Today's notes are on multiplying decimals. You guys have worked with integer operations, so we're going to start with multiplying today. Tomorrow we'll be dividing decimals. So a quick review, starting with this first one right here. 4.1 or 4 1/10 has one value or one decimal place after the decimal. So any text box that has a T, you can edit it and just put your values in there. 4 12 hundredths has two values behind it. Oops, I may hit the back. Two values. And that means if you multiply those two values, 4 12 hundredths times 4 1/10, you would have three values behind your answer. So right here, you're going to change this to three numbers. So in our answer, if we were to multiply it, we'd have three numbers behind the decimal point. Okay, so let's go into our practice. Our first set of numbers is 1.23 times 4.5. Now, just to see how many numbers are behind our decimal, we have 1, 2, 3 values. So that means we should have three numbers in the product. So when you multiply with decimals, you don't need to line up the decimal points. What you do need to do, though, is make sure that the value that has more numbers is on top. Because really 4.5 is actually larger than 1.23, but that doesn't need to be on top. I don't need to add zeros. I don't need to line up the decimals. And then you just multiply. So imagine that this is 123 times 45. So 3 times 5 is 15, 2 times 5 is 10, plus 1 is 11. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 1 is 6. Add your 0. So now we're done with this number. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9, and 4 times 1 is 4. And then you add 5, 3, and this is 15, carry the 1, 5. So now we need to make sure our decimal is in the correct spot. So remember, we put on our notes that you should have three numbers in the product, in the decimal, in the product. So there should be 1, 2, 3 values. All right, so then on the second problem, you should have 1, 2, 3 numbers in the product, in the decimal. There should be three numbers behind the decimal. So now you decide which number do you want to have on top. Now, I know that this 0 doesn't have a value, so I'm going to cross it out. I'm going to put my 1.4 on top, and then I'm going to have 0.09 on bottom, and then multiply it out. 4 times 9 is 36. 9 times 1, 9 plus 3 is 12. So you can multiply by the 0, but remember you're just going to get your 0. So 0, 2, 1. So you should have 1, 2, 3 numbers behind your decimal. 1, 2, 3 values behind your decimal. So it should be 0.126. 26, and then let me put my answer here, 5.535. Okay, for problem number 3, you have 200 times 0.004, so there should be three numbers because you have three numbers behind the value, behind the decimal. So I should have three numbers in the product. I'm going to change this to where it says three numbers in the decimal or behind the decimal. Okay, so 200 times 0.004. 4 times 0, 0, 4 times 0, 0. 4 times 2 is 8. And then you can multiply your zeros if you want to. But I know for sure that I should have 1, 2, 3 numbers behind my decimal. So 1, 2, 3 values. So even if I did my zeros, my answer is still going to look the same. So it's either going to be 0.8 or you could write it as 0.800. Either way, it's the same answer. So 0.8, or add in those 2 extra zeros. Okay, so example number 4, there's only one value behind the decimal. There's no decimal at 160, so you're only going to have one number in the product, one number behind the decimal in the product. Then let's go ahead and do our division. 160 times 0.4, because I don't need that 0, but I do need the 0.4, so 4/10. And then multiply. 4 times 0 is 0. 4 times 6 is 24. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 2 is 6. And then I don't have to keep multiplying. That's my only value. And you should have one number behind the decimal. So 64. So you can have 64.0 or just 64. Okay, for number 5, we have 2 numbers here behind the decimal and 1 number here. So that means you should have a total of 3 values behind the decimal. So I have a 0. I don't need that 0. It has no value. I don't need that 0. So 0.44 times 0.5. Then you can multiply. So 4 times 5 is 20. 4 times 5 is 20, plus 2 is 22. And now remember, we have 1, 2, 3 values behind our decimal. So 1, 2, 3, your decimal goes right in front of that first 2. So you can either write it as 0.22 or you can write it as 0.220. Okay, on the very last one, count your numbers that are inside those 2 numbers you're multiplying. 2, 3, 4. So you should have 4 values behind your decimal. So I'm going to get rid of that first 0. 0.054 times 1.6. So remember, this value is actually bigger, but this one has more place values. So 4 times 6 is 24. 6 times 5 is 30, plus 2 is 32. And 6 times 0, 0, plus 3, 3. Put your 0, because we've already multiplied times that 6. And then 1 times 4, 4, 1 times 5, 5, 1 times 0, 0. And then add 4 and 0, 4, 2 and 4, 6, 3 and 5 is 8. So how many numbers did we say that were going to be behind the decimal? We have 4, because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Decimal goes all the way in front. So 0.0864 is the final answer. Okay, guys, I hope you understood multiplying decimals. Hopefully it felt like a quick review. On today's assignment, you should have maybe 1 or 2 word problems and some where you're just saying how many numbers are going to be behind the decimal in your product.